The nature of God, the idea of God, first of all, is a very human idea. This concept that there's something beyond us. There's a creator. The idea of recognizing our own createdness, that we weren't here and now we're here, and we know that soon we will not be here. Other people will be here, and so the Jewish understanding of God, which comes into the world obviously with the great Jewish tradition, basically morphs into Christianity, which has a very different view of God. And then about 600 years later, the prophet comes and really is addressing both the Jewish and the Christian understandings, acknowledging the Jewish God, but criticizing the Christian God. And so there's this idea of restoring a kind of radical monotheism to God. So I think that's at the heart of Islam, is to restore a radical monotheism to God, that God is one, without any partners, without any personas, the persons of God, the triune God. And so for Muslims, we learn about God first and foremost from the Quran. But outside of that, there is also an understanding in our tradition that your belief in God should not be a type of imitation of just simply something that drives atheists crazy. Why do you believe in God? Because the Quran says so. Well, how do you know the Quran's from God? Because God says so. Where does he say it? In the Quran. So there's this idea of trying to get out of that circular reasoning by really coming to a natural philosophy and a natural understanding of God. So you have those two tracks. If we look at what the Quran says about God, the most fundamental thing it says about God is La ilaha illallah. There is no God. There is nothing worthy of worship except the one true God. The name Allah, there's a different opinion about it, but one of the opinions is it comes from walaha, which means to bewilder or to perplex. Elohai is in the Jewish tradition, they have Elohim, Ilah in Arabic. Right. These are related. There are others, Muslim scholars say Allah is just uniquely a name that has no derivation, that it's the personal name of God. It's like John or Mark is the personal name of a human being. And so Muslims try to understand God through the Quran first and foremost. And the most fundamental verse that tells us about God is the 112th chapter, which is a stunning summation of the reality of God. So it says, Qul huwallahu ahad, say God is one. And one is not a number in the Arabic tradition. Numbers begin with 2. So say God is unique, God is one. Qul Allahu samad, God cannot be, there's no hollowness to God. God is whole, God is infinite. God has no needs. And then, lam yalid wa lam yulad, God was not begotten, nor did he beget. And then finally, wa lam yakun lahu kufuwan ahad, there's nothing like unto God. So any idea that comes to the mind, one of the things that I learned as a student of theology was anything that occurs to your mind, God is other than that. So we cannot conceptualize God. God has no gender. Unfortunately, in Arabic, you can speak without the problem of masculine and feminine like you can in Persian. In English, we have he and she and it. And so generally, the Quran has been translated with the masculine. But there's no masculinity associated with God. God is Dhul Jalali wa Ikram, a possessor of majestic attributes and a possessor of beautiful attributes. But that verse, according to our theologians, looks at these 8 aspects. The first, God is one. It means that God is neither composite, he's simple, he's neither composite, nor are there partners. There aren't gods beside him. So it negates those 2 aspects. Allahu Samad, he neither has need, and everybody is in need of God. So he has no needs. He's free of needs and defects. And then Lam Yalid wa Lam Yulad, he is neither caused, nor does he cause anything in an Aristotelian first mover sense, like that's connected with the cause. So he neither causes in a cause and effect sense, nor is he caused himself. And finally, there's nothing like him. He has no peer, and he has no opposite. So that really sums up, it's an extraordinary chapter because even a Bedouin can learn that. And I was once in the United Arab Emirates, and I was with some Bedouin, and they asked me what my religion was before Islam, and I said I was an Orthodox Christian. And they said, what did they believe? And I said, well, they believe Jesus is the Son of God. And then one of the young Bedouin, and they had their sticks, you know, that they have for camels. And he said, well, that makes sense because, you know, he didn't have a father, so God must have been his father. And the other Bedouin took his stick and hit him on his knee and said, Lam yalid wa lam yulad. He neither begot nor was he begotten. And it really struck me. These were illiterate people. But this verse, you know, this short chapter made him a kind of theologian.
How do you contrast the two ideas that God is beyond categories, which you described very eloquently, in the so-called apophatic tradition, that you can only know God is in the negative
via negativity,
as opposed to asserting. And yet, on the other hand, you have the 99 names of God, which are all positive affirmations.
Sure. Great question. So, first of all, the idea, you know, the Aristotelian categories begins with substance, and then it's got all of these predicates that go with that. So, God is not a substance. There's no genus. God is outside of the idea of genus and species. So we can't define him in a traditional way that logicians would have used in pre-modern logic. But at the same time, and this is where you get in our tradition what's called tanzih and tashbih, which tanzih is like transcendence, that God is transcendent, utterly transcendent, but also that God allows us to know God. And the way God allows us to know is through attributes. But those attributes have to be understood in a kind of mathematical sense of any number over infinity is zero. So the idea that it's approximations. So the 99 names tell us that God is merciful and compassionate. Those are the first two attributes in the Quran. So how do we know mercy and compassion? Well, the Quran says, look into yourselves, you know, that we have been created in this metaphysical image so that we can know, this imago Dei, that we can know God through reflecting on ourselves. And that's why the great polymath, Persian polymath Raghib Isfahani says that every book that has ever been revealed has said in it, know yourself and you will know God in some way or another. And so self-knowledge is what will take us to a kind of knowledge of God.
And that's a natural theology too.
That's a natural theology, absolutely. And so the names, there are 99 names. There's actually 121 names in the Quran. But there are 99 that the Prophet said whoever memorizes them and knows them will enter paradise if they know them. Yeah, and so like the Jewish tradition has 72 names of God in some of the iterations. So the idea that God has multiple names, in fact, in our tradition, there are names that we don't know. God has withheld names from us. And there's a beautiful prayer of the Prophet, every name that you have taught to a prophet or taught to someone, or you have kept in your own knowledge, so that God has infinite names because he's infinite.